authority say the plan amounted to an attack on the right to protest. But Policing Minister Chris Philp says when it impacts people's lives, the police should have a right to intervene.
Of course we, as a government, fully respect the right to protest, but that does need to be properly balanced with the right of the general public to go about their day-to-day lives. And where some of these protesters have been deliberately trying to ruin the lives of their fellow citizens, we think that is not acceptable. But it's possible to protest while at the same time allowing ordinary citizens to go about their daily lives.
Former aide to the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Leon Emirali, told GB News there needs to be a balance here.
There is a fine line here between being what's sensible policing and also being perhaps too heavy-handed. And I think no one wants to live in a police state. And that maybe is some of the fears that people will be having when reading this policy. We want to live in a country where the police are fair and firm, but not sort of restricting people's right to protest.
A 22-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder following a drive-by shooting at a church in central London on Saturday. A 7-year-old girl has been left in a life-threatening condition after shots were fired from a car at St Aloysius Church in Euston. 4 other women and 1 child were also injured in the attack. Thousands of teachers in England and Wales could go on strike over pay as the results of a ballot will be announced later today. Elsewhere, nurses are walking out on Wednesday and Thursday this week. Members of the Royal College of Nursing have warned the next walkout could include all eligible members in England if no progress is made in negotiations. Meanwhile, GMB leaders will meet today to decide whether to call more strikes among their ambulance members. It comes as the government calls pay demands unaffordable. In Scotland, meanwhile, teachers are beginning their 16 days of rolling strike action in an ongoing dispute over pay. Schools in Glasgow and East Lothian will only be open for pupils taking the preliminary exams. It comes after the Scottish Government offered a 5% pay offer on Thursday, but union members demand 10%. People across Northern Ireland will begin receiving £600 energy payments from today. This includes a £400 payment as part of the UK support scheme and the £200 as part of the country's dependence on home heating oil. Some households will be sent a voucher, whilst others who pay bills by direct debit will receive the money in their bank accounts. Russia and Belarus have begun joint military exercises, with Ukraine fearing it could spark a new ground offensive. Russia previously used Belarus during its invasion of Ukraine last February and will now conduct air force drills together. Belarus claims the air drills are defensive and won't enter the war, whilst Moscow denies it has been pressuring its ally to be more active in the conflict. But Kyiv says the country must be ready for a potential attack at its border with Belarus. Italy's most wanted Mafia boss has been arrested in Sicily after 30 years on the run. Matteo Messina Denaro, who was detained in Palermo, is alleged to be a boss of the Sicilian Mafia. He's been sentenced to a life term for his role in the 1992 murders of 2 anti-mafia prosecutors, as well as facing life for his role in bomb attacks in Florence, Rome and Milan, which killed 10 people the following year. Marks and Spencer has announced plans to open 20 new shops across the UK. The store overhaul is said to create over 3,000 jobs. The company also plans to open 8 full-line stores in shopping centres in Birmingham or Manchester and 12 new food halls in places like Barnsley or Stockport. This is GB News. More from me in half an hour. Now it's back to Bev.
Very good morning. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. Thank you for joining me. Here's what's coming up this morning. Remember last year when eco-activists were blocking our roads in protests over use of oil? Well, police could be allowed to intervene with protests before they become too disruptive under new proposed measures. Parliament will today debate the amendment to the Public Order Bill, but have your say here. GBviews at gbnews.uk. It sounds all a bit chilling to me. And my sympathies to working parents in Scotland. The school children will miss more lessons this week as teachers plan 16 days of rolling strike action. This all happens as we await the results of the National Education Union's 300,000 members who've been balloted on strike action, which would affect England and Wales next month. And on my panel this morning, I'll be joined by ex-SAS trooper Phil Campion. Wonder what he thinks of Harry exposing his military service kill count. And the super smart author and broadcaster Amy Nickel. And today's Twitter poll, I'm asking you, do you support teachers taking strike action? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews to have your say. So, Rishi Sunak will announce an expansion to police powers that would give officers the ability to stop disruption before it begins. He'll claim that he's answering calls from police chiefs who are asking for clarity on how to tackle the so-called guerrilla tactics by eco-protest groups like Extinction Rebellion or Just Stop Oil. Speaking yesterday, the policing minister, Chris Philp, responded to claims this was an illiberal crackdown on the right to protest.
Of course we, as a government, fully respect the right to protest, but that does need to be properly balanced with the right of the general public to go about their day-to-day lives. And where some of these protesters have been deliberately trying to ruin the lives of their fellow citizens, we think that is not acceptable. But it's possible to protest while at the same time allowing ordinary citizens to go about their daily lives.
So joining us now in the studio is Olivia Utley. Good morning, Olivia. Nice to see you. Just remind us the background of this bill, how we've got to this point and why it's being introduced.
Public Order Bill was introduced last year to try and crack down on protests such as the Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil protests. The thinking is that protests have sort of taken on a new flavour in this country. Instead of sort of one-off protests by the odd group, we're seeing these protests again and again from the same groups, which cause massive public disruption. And I think it was Priti Patel who first introduced it in order to try and, help people, ordinary people, live their day-to-day lives, because we've seen during the last year support for protest went down. This amendment to the Public Order Bill is quite interesting. There are three parts to it, essentially. One part is that it'll crack down, it'll define slow walking protests as serious disruption. So last year we saw this issue with an Extinction Rebellion protest. You had people walking very slowly on the streets, bringing traffic to a complete standstill, no one able to get anywhere, ambulances unable to get through, etc. But police weren't sure whether they were allowed to intervene because it wasn't clear whether slow walking was counted as a serious disruption. Then you've got, what were the other elements to it?
I think the thing that struck me, Olivia, with all of this is, my understanding is that the police already have these laws. They have existing powers.
Which is why...
But they're not using them.
Well, yes. So what Rishi Sunak is going to claim is that this is essentially just a clarification of existing laws that are already in place. So it's the slow walking, allowing police to stop protests before they've started, which is very important. That's something which they're not yet allowed to do. So he will say that it isn't at all a crackdown on the rights of protesters. It's simply a way to make sure that police are clear on what the laws are, just a clarification of existing law, because you've got a situation now where in some areas police are, one could argue, being too timid in cracking down on protests, and in other areas they're doing things which go a little beyond what the current legislation is. That's the way Sunak will frame it, but he is likely to see pushback both from the Labour Party, who quite often support the tactics of these environmental protesters on the grounds that their protests are so important, anything can go, but also from the libertarian right of his party, the sort of Trussites, who worry about the implications for free speech and worry that this is the start of a slippery slope.
Yeah.
That said, the public are pretty sick of protesters, and the calculation from the government seems to be that this is probably quite an easy political win for the government, and it has the added bonus of making Rishi Sunak look tough at a time when people don't really feel he is that tough.
Yeah. Well, I am not one of those members of the public. Thank you, Olivia Utley there. I'm not one of those members of the public that think this is a particularly good idea. Yes, I don't want our lives to be disrupted, but I also don't want them to take an absolute sledgehammer to the right to protest. So human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell joins me now. Good morning, Peter. Thank you for joining GB News this morning. What are your concerns? Do you share my worry that actually we all should have the legitimate right to protest, and protest will always cause an element of disruption, and for some reason the police are not using the powers they already have.
You're absolutely right. The powers already exist, but they're not properly being used. The big danger with this proposed amendment to the Public Order Bill is that it would criminalise people not because of what they have done, but because of what the police think they might do. So this is a bid to take preemptive action based on an interpretation by the police about what protesters could potentially do in order to shut them down. And that could mean that perfectly lawful, otherwise lawful and peaceful protests could fall within the remit of the legislation and be banned, and the participants arrested and given a criminal conviction.
Saw in the last couple of years, probably for the first time since protests against going into Iraq, for the Iraq war, we saw actually large numbers of people protesting in the UK over government decisions. I have never been a protester traditionally, but I was out on the roads at the freedom marches because I objected to children being kept from school. I objected to a lot of the draconian measures with the government apparently getting involved in the minutiae of our lives. Do you think it is entirely coincidental that they're now bringing in these powers given that backdrop?
Well, certainly we are seeing a very slow, gradual, but very determined erosion of the right to protest. There have been a series of public order bills and legislations over recent years, which have gradually given the police more and more powers and placed more and more restrictions on the right to protest. Now, of course, even if people say we want these disruptions shut down, that's not always the way it works. Sometimes protests that are not particularly disruptive are taken and shut down by the police, or disrupted by the police, or moved by the police, or otherwise restricted by the police. So we have to be very, very careful in proposing new legislation, because what is happening is a cut-by-cut process of limiting freedom of expression, and that will affect everyone. You may not agree with just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion, but you may have a cause you want to protest about. Under this new legislation, your right to do so may be determined to be a criminal act, and you could face arrest, again, not because of what you have done, but because of what the police think you might do.
Do you think, as Olivia was saying there, this is actually quite a political move for Rishi Sunak? He's perceived right now to be fairly weak. This might be seen as him being strong. And of course, there are many people, and I sympathise with those who've had their lives disrupted because of these idiots that hang on M25 gantries and block the roads and cause huge disruption. The irony is that it's become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The irony is that the people who were making such a huge amount of disruption into people's lives have handed the government a stick to beat them, and therefore all of us with. On that note, really, and I know I'm talking a lot, Peter, and I want you to hear what you say, but I do feel very, very strongly about this, and I think it's really important that people understand what we might lose here. Is that once you give up these powers, it's not really traditional in history that the government ever give the power back to the people, is it?
Absolutely not. Since the Public Order Act in 1986, there have been a succession of increasingly repressive laws passed to restrict the right to protest and to give the police exceptional powers. We were told when the Public Order Act in 1986 was passed, it was primarily to combat street hooliganism and rioting and football hooligans who went on the rampage after football matches. It's hardly ever been used against those. It's increasingly been used against peaceful protests. So I've been arrested many times under the Public Order Act of 1986 for simply staging a peaceful protest, but the police have interpreted my actions as falling within the remit of the law, and that protest has been shut down and I've been carted off to the police station. You're right, once the laws are on the statute book, they're never repealed. And that's the huge, huge danger. We're going down a slippery slope, which is going to mean that anyone, for any reason, could have their protest deemed to be potentially disruptive and therefore shut down and arrested. OK, thank you so much, Peter Tatchell, this morning. Thank you for joining us.
you know what, the fact is, you never know what you might one day want to protest about. You just don't know until something comes along that you feel really strongly about, and suddenly, as part of your democratic Western right, you no longer have the right to protest. So I think it is something that we should all consider quite carefully. Now, a man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after a shooting in North London left 6 people injured, including a 7-year-old girl who remains in a critical condition. The force say that the 7-year-old girl remains in a stable but life-threatening position in hospital. For the latest, we can go to our reporter, Theo Chicumba, who is in Euston for us now. Good morning, Theo. Really shocking story to have this on the streets of London. What's the latest?
Yes, it's been described as a senseless act of violence by the Metropolitan Police. Here on Saturday, around 1:30, a shotgun was fired. Around 300 people were here for a memorial for Sarah Sanchez, a 20-year-old who died from leukemia, and her mother, who also died in the same month. So over the last few days, people who live in this community have been coming to terms with what happened. Where we are is Euston, the Euston area. So just behind me on my left is Euston Station, one of the busiest stations in London, and there's also school and residential homes in this area as well. In terms of injuries, as you mentioned, there were 4 women who were injured, and at the moment a 48-year-old woman sustained potentially life-changing injuries, and of course 2 young children as well, a 12-year-old girl who sustained a leg injury. She was treated at her hospital before being discharged yesterday afternoon. She's expected to make a full recovery, but of course the force say there is a 7-year-old girl who remains stable but has a life-threatening condition. And as you mentioned as well, the Metropolitan confirmed in the early hours of this morning that a 22-year-old man was arrested yesterday afternoon just before 4 p.m. in Barnet here in London, and he is currently in custody, and he's been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder and in connection with the shooting here in the Euston area. Now, in terms of responses from those in leadership, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has described the shooting as deeply distressing, and the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, wrote on her Twitter that she was deeply concerned by the shocking shooting. In terms of the Metropolitan Police themselves, at the moment they are appealing to anyone who heard or saw anything to contact them urgently.
OK, thank you, Theo. Theo Chicumba there down on the streets in Euston. Now, don't forget to vote in our Twitter poll this morning. I am asking you, do you support the teachers taking strike action? Cast your vote now. As always, you can send me an email, also gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews. Haven't our poor children suffered enough? Now, after the break, ex-SAS trooper Phil Campion and author Amy Nikel will be here to give us their take on the government cracking down on disruptive protests. Now, though, time for a quick break. Don't go anywhere.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television and online, across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Very good morning. Welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News, TV, radio and online. I'm really pleased to say this morning, Amy Nicole is here, writer and broadcaster, regular to the show. I think your stool's a bit higher than mine, Amy. We might have to sort this out.
I do feel very tall today.
We don't want to quickly change our stools on camera, but there we go. And also, ex-SAS trooper, security expert, new guest on Bev Turner today, Phil Campion. Great to see you, Phil.
Good to be here.
Thank you for coming in.
No, thanks for having me.
And also, you get an A-star for hugs. You gave the best hug, I think, of any guest I've ever had. That's a proper hug, a Phil Campion hug. Right, let's start with the government's new plans to widen police powers for disruptive protests. We've just been talking about it. You heard me talking to Peter Tatchell. Amy Nicole, is this a change that needs to be made, or the power's already there?
I think that the power's already there. I don't think they're always used very efficiently, but I think that's more a subject about police training and the number of police. But I think this is just demonstrates about politicians caring more about statues than people. That's what this is for me.
Right, what do you mean by that? Explain that.
So I think never underestimate the power and importance of protest. And I was looking at some of the examples where protest has been so important, such as Pride.
Yeah.
And with this new legislation, at the time, so say somebody was very homophobic, could have said that they had serious unease.
Yeah.
So the protest couldn't go ahead because that's one of these conditions. I think the thing about it is it's all very, very subjective. So it's all about how it's making people feel, and it just restricts it. And it's too open to interpretation for me, and I think it will be willfully misused by the government, who will crack down on protests that really needed to go ahead.
Any protest. I mean, it will clamp down, Phil Campion, on any protest that anybody wants to make. And before it's become disruptive. We need this in a democracy, don't we? The right to
We need the right to protest, but we also need the right to protect our communities, OK? And if I can't get to hospital because there's a protest going on, what needs to be written here is a common sense bill, all right? And it needs to be fed in at the training stage.
Good luck with that. That
a common sense bill fed in at the training end for the police, all right? So that they fully understand. Now, if there's a march going on and it's going slow and it's not disrupting people, well, let it go. But the minute it turns into something that disrupts other people, then you should be stepping in. And then you should be saying, right, break this one up, let's get aside, and all that sort of stuff. Because at the moment, it looks to me like, you know, some of these marches are done very ad hoc, very last minute. Deliberately to disrupt stuff. So, with marches in particular, there is a way of going around them. You can approach the authorities and say, look, I'm planning this, I want to protest, let's do it properly.
Yeah.
OK? But where you feel there is a need to run onto the streets, then, like I say, the police need to have some sort of common sense check with themselves.
But I guess if this bill is passed, if the public order bill is passed in this state, that going to the police and saying, I'm going to run a protest on Saturday in support of ex-military personnel not being given the support that they need, right?
Yep.
And the police can say, is it going to be disruptive? Well, probably. Well, then you can't do it.
100%. So
and that's not OK, though.
If you are deliberately going out to be disruptive, then you should be stopped.
But
if I was going to be deliberately disruptive, you know, it's not the whole point of a demonstration. The demonstration's point is to get your point across.
No.
You don't have to do that in a disruptive way.
I think some of the most memorable protests have always been the more disruptive, because otherwise you just don't get the attention. And when you talk about the idea that the ambulances can't get to where they're going...
So you're condoning that I could be as noisy as I like on the and disruptive as I like to get my point across?
Well, if the ambulances...
But the police aren't allowed to do anything about that?
Aren't achieving
and I can stop as many ambulances going to save people as I like, but that's fine. That's all right. You know what I mean? No, it's not.
Well,
there needs to come a point where people actually do something about what's being done. If it's disrupting or harming other people, it needs to be
police
stopped.
are already well within their powers to make arrests, which is why most of the Just Stop Oil
I think they feel. I think the police in particular feel.
Prison.
I think the police in particular feel that they don't know. There's too much of a grey area in there for
them.
them.
Do you know, I was listening to Mark Rowley, the Commissioner of the Met Police, being interviewed about this morning. And he didn't know whether a protest, whether a walking protest could be stopped by the police at this time, or whether they had to be sat down, because that was one of the things Just Stop Oil did, wasn't it? In order to circumnavigate the law, rather than sitting on the middle of the road, they just walked very slowly, and they argued that that meant they couldn't therefore be arrested. Even Mark Rowley this morning was saying he wasn't sure if that was the case or not. If he doesn't know, how are his coppers going to know?
The defining factor should not be how fast the procession's going or whether they're sat stood or doing cartwheels down the road. No one cares, all right? You're getting your point across. The minute it impacts on other people who are trying to go about their daily business, then you have to have a check. Is that harmful to those people who are going about their daily business? And if it is, it has to be stopped, because you can't stop people going to hospital because you want to get your point across.
The goals of most of these protests are to make sure in the long run there is less disruption to people's everyday lives.
In the short term, you can't argue with someone in the back of an ambulance who can't get there. You cannot argue that in the short term.
Well, you can if there's a situation where ambulances aren't getting there on non-strike days. At the moment, our country is malfunctioning in so many different ways.
If someone's in the back of an ambulance and they can't get to where they need to be because of a protest, or that protester needs moving.
However, you know, the first point I did try and make was an issue of police training, and I think you've really demonstrated that is a problem there with Mark Rowley not knowing exactly. If the police aren't sure what powers they do and don't have at the moment, and I don't think we need more legislation. We just need more police training.
We need more police. We need more police empowered to move people on if it's a problem, safely and without any kind of violence. Although I have to say,
on the recruitment,
sometimes we've watched the Just Stop Oil, and
if the police are in a position where they can say you do get the correct training and we can make the dispatches, that's going to help their recruitment as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at the moment, I wouldn't want to be a policeman at the moment because I go, well, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But if I see policemen that do know what they're doing.
Something that you really can't have, though, is emboldening the police so that we see more of what we saw at the Sarah Everard vigil, which was total police chaos. Yeah. Those women shouldn't have been treated like that. They were protesting peacefully, and I think the legislation that's come in or being talked about is we're going to see more of what happened at the Sarah Everard vigil, and that's the concern.
OK. Right, let's move on, guys. Sunak to block Scottish transgender bill using constitutional nuclear option. This story's been kind of sort of bubbling away for a week or so, but I think we're only just sort of getting our heads around what this would mean. Rishi Sunak might try and use for the very first time Westminster's power to block a law that was passed by the Scottish Parliament in relation to gender self-identification. What's he doing?
I think this is really interesting because the whole idea of legal ID for transgender people was actually introduced by Theresa May in 2017. Yes. She thought it would be her gay marriage and would be a total vote winner. It's become very clear that it's a vote loser and it doesn't have any public support. I think that's probably because it's generally very misunderstood and it's conflated with the 2010 Equalities Act about changing rooms, spaces, women's-only spaces. It's nothing to do with that. It's about birth certificates and death certificates, which is about getting married in dignity and dying in dignity. That's all this bill is about. That's why when Theresa May's government looked into it, it was a really, really obvious thing to do. And it's actually a very obvious thing that should be done in the UK. And I think Rishi blocking it is to appeal to the public and oppose Nicola Sturgeon, which is just their absolute raison d'etre, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. What do you think, Phil?
I mean, the transgender thing aside, this is it's a touchy subject and one that actually is probably way above my pay grade, to be honest, right? OK? But look, there's a political thing going on here, isn't there, OK? Sturgeon appears to have sort of like found a little thing she can prod, a little thing she can poke and stir up a hornet's nest. And if that did get through, OK, she's then got called to say, well, actually, you did that and we went against them and now we can do this and now she's getting a foothold into politics this side of the border and that side of the border. And that can't be allowed to happen if they want to continue on the same deal.
Yeah. We got a glimpse into that dynamic, didn't we, between Westminster and Sturgeon in that Matt Hancock autobiography that he brought out recently when he confessed that they were considering, they were going to drop mask mandates in schools for kids. Then Nicola Sturgeon said, actually, we're going to carry on. And then the decision was made purely as a reaction to what Nicola Sturgeon was doing, to stick our kids back in masks in schools. So that's got to be playing a part in this, hasn't it, Amy? That what we don't understand, what we are never clear about, or what there is not enough sufficiently transparency about for the public, is what's going on between the English government, British government, and Nicola Sturgeon.
Yeah, it's constantly like this bubbling little Cold War, isn't it? But I think because the India referendum 2014, so much has changed since then, and the main thing that's changed is Brexit. Scotland didn't want to leave the EU, so I don't think it's surprising that they're pushing for another independence referendum because they're so ideologically opposed at so many steps of the way.
I think, and actually, you're kind of right, Phil, to say that this is about transgender issues, but in a way, it's not really about transgender issues at all. I mean,
on Britain's side, it's not.
Yes.
I think on Scotland's side, they've done what's right and what they've looked at in Parliament rather than public opinion, oh, let's play politics. I think, if anything, Scotland hasn't played politics here.
Are you OK with 16-year-olds being able to self-identify and change their birth certificate after only 3 months of living?
It sounds nuts, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does. But every single bit of scientific research into this says gender-affirming therapies from as early as possible is the best way to deal with transgender kids. It's so hard to understand, and I think that's why it can come across and sound so wacky. But that's what Scotland's found. It happens in so this self-ID, it's not a new thing. It's successfully rolled out in Ireland.
You can already do it in Scotland. You can already do it. You can't do it here, but you can already do it in Scotland. It's just that they're going to change it so that you can do it younger and with less.
It's literally what says on your birth certificate and your passport.
And without a medical.
It's nothing to do with any medication, any healthcare. It's just what it says.
OK. All right. Thank you, Phil, Amy. More in just a moment. Now, thousands of teachers in England and Wales could be set to walk off the job as the National Education Union prepares to announce the result of a strike ballots today at 5 o'clock. This comes as teachers are striking for 16 days in Scotland. We're going to be looking at the impact this will have on our kids. That's after your morning's news with Tamsin.
Bev, thanks very much. Good morning from the GB newsroom at 10:33. Police in England and Wales could be given powers to intervene in protests before they become too disruptive. Parliament will debate an amendment to the Public Order Bill, allowing police to shut down demonstrations before they cause disruption. Human rights group Liberty say the plan amounted to an attack on the right to protest. But the policing minister, Chris Philp, says when it impacts people's lives, the police should have a right to intervene.
Of course, we, as a government, fully respect the right to protest, but that does need to be properly balanced with the right of the general public to go about their day-to-day lives. And where some of these protesters have been deliberately trying to ruin the lives of their fellow citizens, we think that is not acceptable. But it's possible to protest while at the same time allowing ordinary citizens to go about their daily lives.
A 22-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder following a drive-by shooting at a church in central London on Saturday. A 7-year-old girl has been left in a life-threatening condition after shots were fired from a car at St Aloysius Church in Euston. 4 other women and a 12-year-old girl were also injured in the attack. Thousands of teachers in England and Wales could go on strike over pay as the result of a ballot will be announced later today. Elsewhere, nurses are walking out on Wednesday and Thursday this week. Members of the Royal College of Nursing have warned the next walkout could include all eligible members in England if no progress is made in negotiations. It comes as the government calls pay demands unaffordable. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Very good morning. It's 10:37. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. Right, you've been getting in touch. Thank you. Remember, gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email. On the police protest powers, Jeff says this is supposed to be a democratic country. And on a non-party one-time only vote, we voted to leave the EU and all the bureaucracy that this involved. Chris has said, I believe there should certainly be a law to say that protesters cannot block roads or vandalise property, but I'm sure this law already exists, so there's no need to give police additional powers. I kind of agree with you, Chris. And on teachers striking, Sylvia has said teachers seem to forget they only work 9 months a year, 12 weeks holiday and on full pay. Not a bad job, if you ask me. Let me know what you think. Keep those emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thankfully, most teachers are working, so they wouldn't have seen that message, because that is exactly the kind of sentiment that winds teachers up, and they always say, we do much more work when we're not in the classroom than you realise. But school children in Scotland will miss more lessons this week as teachers plan 16 days of rolling strike action in the continuing dispute over pay. It comes as the UK's largest teaching union organised a ballot of 300,000 members calling for a fully funded, above-inflation pay rise. And we're expecting the results of that ballot today at 5 o'clock. The National Education Union will have to give 2 weeks' notice of any industrial action. So joining me now is Conservative peer and education commentator Lord Rafe Lucas. Good morning. Good morning, Lord Lucas.
Good morning.
Lovely to see you. Where do you stand on teachers striking? Our kids have been through so much in the last couple of years, haven't they?
Well, haven't they just? And yes, I'd like to see teachers paid a bit more. Since 2010, senior teachers in real terms are down about 6%, whereas the rest of us are up 2%. So yes, there needs to be something done. I think it's really destructive to do it via strikes. It hurts the children so much, and we just don't need that now. And it also devalues teachers in the eyes of the public and particularly parents. You want a relationship with your teachers where you know that you're both caring for your children, and really, that's everybody's primary concern. Yeah. I don't think striking works with that. I think there have to be other routes.
What might those routes be then? Because of course there will be teachers watching this, and teachers' union representatives will say we don't have any choice. They aren't listening to us. We have to make our feelings known.
I think get your parents on your side. You've got a huge proportion of the UK population who are sending children to your schools. Organise around that. Work with your parents. School funding is going up. There is a proper school pay review system. Political pressure ought to work over time. That it hasn't in the past. I apologise for being a Conservative and a supporter of a government that's done that. I would like to see teacher pay go back up. But I just think doing it via strikes loses support. It destroys the relationship that ought to be there between parents and teachers and schools.
Is there a social contagion about strikes at the moment? Do you think we've got, the teachers will be looking at the paramedics, at the nurses, at the trained drivers and the RMT, etc., and they'll be saying, well, if they're going to do it, then why shouldn't we? Is that what's going on here?
Maybe to some extent. The NEU has always been a strike-infested union. I think it's in their blood a bit. So no, but I mean, I think nurses you meet once in a lifetime if you're lucky. Teachers are with you for 10, 20 years of your life as a parent. And then, and having been there as for your similar distance for your life as a child, it should be a very different relationship.
Yeah, our viewers have been getting in touch on this, and Ian has said it's so predictable. Teachers are largely left-wing, have been radicalised at Teacher Training College. It's politically motivated action to bring down the government disgraceful. Do you agree?
There's an element of that in it. The NEU has not been an easy union to get on with either for Conservative or previously Labour governments. The other teaching unions tend to be much more centred and rational. So I shrug my shoulders when the NEU does something. It's not a constructive part of the education system.
No. If this ballot goes ahead, or if the strikes are given the go-ahead at 5 o'clock today after this ballot, what would you expect the government to do in response?
I hope we can focus on what the likely results of the teacher pay review in the summer of this year are. And it comes against a background of decent funding for schools. I think a commitment to go along with the pay review recommendation next year, that it should take full account of the inflation over the period that the review looks at. I think that's the proper way of doing things. Good structures that produce good results and pushing over time to get back to where we were in 2010. I mean, it ought to be a deliverable commitment. It clearly isn't something that can be done in the middle of a financial crisis this year.
Absolutely. OK, thank you, Lord Rafe Lucas. There. I mean, the Department of Education say that they've already met the union's request for this further £2 billion for schools for next year. And in the autumn statement, they were awarded teachers with the highest pay award in 30 years. It's just extraordinary. And the thing is, these strikes don't just affect the children. They really affect the parents because we have to go to work. And so it just becomes a spiral that we do not need, as Lord Lucas said, we do not need whilst we've got we're hanging on the edge of an economic cliff, it feels at the moment, doesn't it? Right, I'm going to try and keep things cheerful. It's not easy, is it? But today is the most depressing day of the year, according to calculations by former Cardiff University psychologist Cliff Arnold. It's otherwise known as Blue Monday. However, the charity Samaritans is renaming today Brew Monday, which I think is brilliant, encouraging everyone to reach out over a cup of tea to loved ones and have a natter. Well, our reporter Will Hollis is at Lincoln Railway Station this morning with Samaritans who are talking to commuters on their way to work. Good morning, Will. What have you been hearing down there?
Good morning. Yes, from here in Lincoln. You might be able to call it Blue Monday because it's so cold, but in no way am I feeling depressed today. That's because Gary from Samaritans has been keeping me company, cheering me up and talking to me a little bit about why him and his teams across the country are at train stations like this one. Gary from Lincoln Samaritans, obviously Blue Monday is what people will know it as, but Samaritans are calling it Brew Monday today. Why are we changing from what's become a bit of a tradition, Blue Monday, in the last 15 years?
Yeah, well, let's put a positive spin on this, you know. What we at Samaritans want to do is change it from people feeling down to saying, let's do something different, let's be different, let's interact with people in our families, with our friends, with our colleagues at work, and have a chat and find out what's going on in their life. It might make a difference.
You're talking to people at train stations like this one. Are people talking today on their way to work and in and out of the train station?
Absolutely. We've been here since 6:30 this morning when it was cold and it was dark, but people stopped and they had a discussion with us, and we were giving them out tea bags and coffee bags and just encouraging them that when they get into work or when they get home to the family, just to stop and have a breather and have a discussion with the family and finding out how the other person's day's been.
The idea of Blue Monday is it's supposed to be the most depressing day of the year, and while Samaritans and many scientists would say that it's a load of rubbish, it's pseudoscience, it is cold, it is after Christmas and we've got a cost of living crisis. Are Samaritans experiencing that on the calls that you might be getting?
You know, Will, the evidence is thin for a Blue Monday. Each day at the moment for a lot of people is difficult. Make no mistake about that, it's a difficult time for people. And what we're trying to do is just help them along and just say, if you need to talk, come and talk to us, or talk with someone who you trust.
And then if people don't have anybody that they trust, we know that loneliness is a bit of a problem for not just older people who you might traditionally think as lonely, but for a lot of young people as well. If they don't have friends and family and they're not lucky enough to pass you today, how can they get in touch with Samaritans or other similar groups?
You know, loneliness really can be a problem. And what we would say is contact us. It's as easy as that. And there are 3 ways that you can do it. You can write to us, and the address is Free Post, Samaritans Letters. That's all it is. 3 words on the envelope. Free Post, Samaritans Letters. Or you can email us, and that's joe@samaritans.org. That's jo@samaritans.org. Or the majority of people like to ring us, and the telephone number is 116 123. And when you ring us, you'll have our full attention, and we won't judge, we certainly won't give advice, but we will listen to what the issues are and certainly try and help find some resolution to what's going on for you.
Gary, thank you for talking to us today. I know that train stations have had a lot of trouble recently because of the strikes, and maybe some people have been having difficulties at train stations for other reasons, but with Samaritans here, they've certainly been looking after us, offering us tea and coffee, and looking after a lot of people who are just trying to get about their day as well.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Will Hollis there. You know what? It is the little things in life, isn't it, that keep your spirits up. Getting a bit of fresh air, even if it's terrible weather like today. No such thing as bad weather, just the wrong clothes. That's what I always tell my kids when I'm dragging them out for a walk and they don't want to go. Right, let me introduce my panel to you this morning. I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Amy Nickel, writer and broadcaster, and ex-SAS trooper and security expert Phil Campion. Right, guys. Let's talk about Prince Harry. I know it seems ridiculous. I didn't think we were going to be doing this, but it is still the front page of The Sun. It's still in all the papers. Obviously, various different angles broke over the weekend, one of which, Phil, was that Prince Charles is going to stick his head in the sand, effectively. He said at a private dinner party, apparently he's not going to respond. But I was interested to talk to you about the fact that Harry gave away this detail of how many Taliban that he had killed. That's pretty unusual, isn't it?
Yeah, I think Harry has got some serious complex PTSD issues going on there. Yeah. I really do. I think there's seriously up with him to the point that he needs a buddy check properly. Do you know what I mean? I think someone needs to grip him and say, right, come here, son, because you're making a right hash of things. Do you know what I mean? I don't think that's going to be his missus at the present stage. It could have been his brother if he hadn't upset him so much, but I think one of his mates that he served with should at least reach out to him and say, look, mate, let's have a proper conversation about this. Because dumping that sort of stuff into the press is just... It's just not talked about. Look, he knows, people know that he was in an Apache and he was a gunner and all that sort of stuff. So the assumption's going to be that if you've seen combat, then things have happened. Yeah. But those things stay out there. Do you know what I mean? I'm not adverse to people clearing their mental health by talking to people about those sorts of things. Even sort of like saying numbers. You know, if you could confide in somebody, very often it helps to have those conversations, and rightly so. But those conversations are had with your doctor, with a loved one, with someone you served with someone who's not then subsequently going to go, hey, yeah. Look how many people. You just don't do that.
Well, apparently, Amy, the book was originally 800 pages and he edited out 400 to save his family's blushes. The mind boggles as to what he didn't put in there.
Yeah, it does. But I think on the subject of what went on when he was serving, I mean, the story about the Taliban did do the rounds in about 2015, and everybody talked about it then, and I think we've kind of forgotten that. And we talk about proper conversations. I think to defend Harry, is this not a proper conversation? Kind of getting awareness, maybe other people might have the same experiences that he's had and they didn't feel they could talk about it, and maybe this is prompted...
think that people would have talked about this book anyway, Amy. He didn't have to put that figure. He didn't have to say that in particular, OK? that wasn't a conversation that needed airing publicly, and that's what this was about. You know, yeah, the book has generated some deep discussion, and if it helps with mental health, then I'm all for it. But if it does turn out that Harry didn't have all these problems and that he's doing this for the money, he's a proper wrong-un.
Yeah,
Do you know
but
what I mean? A proper wrong-un.
that's not necessarily even up for debate, is it? I mean, I have no reason not to believe everything Harry says. It's just whether he should have said
the reason that he
whether
said
he should have said it in that much detail. But I don't think the actual truth is at question.
No, I'm not questioning the truth. I'm questioning as to why he had to say that
It's the
one particular
motives.
thing.
I mean, there's no doubt that they are both driven by the money.
It's really curious, though, isn't it, that today we've got new information courtesy of a leak.
Yeah.
So it's kind of proving Harry's point that stories are all coming out from who knows where. Meghan's keeping very quiet.
Isn't she?
We haven't heard from her.
Has this slightly changed your opinion of the dynamic of the relationship? Because she's often accused of being, you know, it's really sexist. It's the old stereotype, isn't it? As though he's a passenger in his own life and she's there cracking the whip and making him. There's no doubt she's exerted an extreme influence over him. There is no doubt about that. And she's kind of woken him up to the fact that he was the spare. You know, and it's almost like she's sat there and gone, how does it feel knowing that you were always less important than your brother? And it's like he's gone, was that? Oh, yeah. And, you know, she's played a role, but watching him there in these interviews on his own, he is the architect of his own destiny.
Yeah, I think she's... the timeline from when they met, his behaviour and what he said certainly has changed. He's a lot more open. But I think that with this whole book, I mean, obviously the money played a factor, but I also get the feeling that he really was sick of his narrative being hijacked by the press, and he sees this book as his opportunity to just address history and create a definitive timeline.
No, I disagree a little bit. I mean, I'll tell you for why, right? When he first went off with Meghan, right, he was going to build a new life for himself in America and he wanted out of the public light, OK?
Yeah, privacy.
That's fine. You don't do that, all right? I can understand that with what went on with your mother and all that sort of stuff. I fully get that. But to then go, right, Netflix, book writer, this deal, that deal, Oprah Winfrey, all these... No!
But
that's not keeping out of the public light, is it?
No, I think the privacy thing we've talked about before.
The privacy thing is doing what Charles is doing now. King Charles, he's going, I'm not going to talk about it. How about that?
But he is talking about it, isn't he?
No, other people are talking about it.
Yeah, but where's that being directed from?
What they've heard at a dinner table. That's not Charles, is it?
I think that this is what happens when you have this weird obligation to the media from birth. All of them have this strange relationship that they have to fulfil the press's wishes in some form, whether it be by an authorised biography like Harry or whether it be through other stories. They have to remain in the media and the press, and it's such an integral part of the survival of the royal family. That's curious and that's a bit strange. And I think...
that's what it's kind of made me realise as well, is that relationship, that kind of that sort of symbiotic relationship that they both depend on each other. The media depends on the royals depend on the media. But it is like a dysfunctional marriage, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because both of them are... Both sides of that have... it comes with consequences. It's
horrible consequences.
It's horrible, kind of toxic relationship, but it is inevitable. The survival of the royal family. Do you think it's done any damage to them, to the royal family?
In terms of the fact that some of the stuff he said probably has damaged them a little bit, security could be argued that, you know, that has been heightened a little bit. They're always going to need security, so that's never going to change, is it, OK? What I think, that with Harry being number 5 in line to the throne, he was perfectly sort of like had his right to step away if he wanted to, OK? I get with the other royals, they do have to have a love-hate relationship with the press because they have got to get their stuff out there. They've got to sort of like remain with what they're doing, and they are sort of like peer heads for the nation. You can't be a peer head for a nation without going in the press. So you are going to want to manipulate to a certain stage what they say about you. Everybody does. I do. Do you know what I mean? I want people writing rubbish about me, all right? That goes without saying. Harry's case for me is where I'm coming back to, because he said he didn't want that anymore. The royal family don't necessarily need him to carry out public duties because they were going to... They sort of like let him step down anyway. So if you're going to get out of the way of the press, don't then subsequently go to Netflix and start writing books and doing all that sort of stuff.
What he didn't want was the non-consensual relationship with the media and the paparazzi. He wants to have a public platform, but at his own...
It's so naive, though, isn't it?
Cake and eat it is what we're getting, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's what my mum would say. She was telling me off, you're having cake and eat it.
Maybe it shouldn't be like that. Maybe we need to look at the way paparazzi operate.
Right, guys, we come to the end of our first hour. We're going to preview the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos next with Liam Halligan. I'll be right back with more after a short break.
Hello, I'm Aidan McKibben, and here's the latest forecast from the Met Office. It's turned colder, and it's only going to feel that way today. There will be some showers, and those showers in places will be falling as snow, but also some sunshine as this low pulls away. We pull in this clean but cold northerly wind. This low brought some rain and some hill snow to the southeast earlier on, but it is moving away. Wintry showers into eastern England. Mainly these are rain and hail at lower levels, but some sleetiness mixed in. Rain showers for the far southwest, but the brunt of the showers are affecting northern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest Wales, and elsewhere there'll be some sunshine, but wherever you are it is going to feel cold. 6 or 7 in the south, 1 or 2 in the north, and that means these showers are going to be coming in as snow, a few centimetres possible at lower levels, more significant snow over the hills of Northern Ireland and northern Scotland, as much as 15 centimetres building up again over the higher parts of northern Scotland, and some very significant snow for Shetland indeed. But wherever you are, it's going to be a cold night, and with temperatures dropping away, risk of ice in places, especially West Wales, southwest England with some rain showers here, northwest England, as well as Northern Ireland and northern Scotland. So some slippery surfaces about first thing on Tuesday, but also a bright start. So although it will be very cold and frosty for all of us, it's going to be a sunny one for many. And those showers will continue into the north and the west with some, again, wintry showers affecting West Wales, northwest England. Those continue into Tuesday night. Northern Ireland and northern Scotland seeing further snow accumulations. On later Tuesday, the risk of gales for northern Scotland and some very significant blizzards, especially over hills and into coasts. So some wintry weather around over the next few days before it turns drier and eventually milder later this week.
Sundays on GB News from 9:30, it's Camilla Tominey.
For a politics show with personality.
Then at 11, Michael Portillo.
For topical discussion, debate, some ethical dilemmas, and sometimes even a sense of the ridiculous.
And at 1 p.m, me, Alistair Stewart. Every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Very good morning. Welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News. Now, before midday, we're going to preview the World Economic Forum set to kick off in Switzerland later today as global leaders meet to discuss the war in Ukraine and tackle recession and inflation figures. All that with Liam Halligan. We're also going to discuss just how feasible our net zero plans are as the government kicks off its Mission Zero ambition. Do you agree? I'm also going to be joined back in the studio by my panellists, ex-SAS trooper Phil Campion and author Amy Nicole to cover more of the day's stories. That's all coming up after a look at your latest news.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Police in England and Wales could be given powers to intervene in protests before they become too disruptive. Parliament will today debate the amendment to the Public Order Bill, which would allow police to shut down demonstrations before they cause disruption. If passed, it would make it easier for police to stop demonstrators blocking roads or slow marching. Human rights group Liberty says the plan amounted to an attack on the right to protest. But Policing Minister Chris Philp says when it impacts people's lives, the police should have a right to intervene.
Of course, we, as a government, fully respect the right to protest, but that does need to be properly balanced with the right of the general public to go about their day-to-day lives. And where some of these protesters have been deliberately trying to ruin the lives of their fellow citizens, we think that is not acceptable. But it's possible to protest while at the same time allowing ordinary citizens to go about their daily lives.
Well, former aide to the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Leon Emirali, told GB News there needs to be a balance.
There is a fine line here between being what's sensible policing and also being perhaps too heavy-handed. And I think no one wants to live in a police state. And that maybe is some of the fears that people will be having when reading this policy. We want to live in a country where the police are fair and firm, but not sort of restricting people's right to protest.
A 22-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder following a drive-by shooting at a church in central London on Saturday. A 7-year-old girl has been left in a life-threatening condition after shots were fired from a car at St Aloysius Church in Euston. 4 other women and 1 child were injured in the attack. Thousands of teachers in England and Wales could go on strike over pay as the results of a ballot will be announced later today. Elsewhere, nurses are walking out on Wednesday and Thursday this week. Members of the Royal College of Nursing have warned the next walkout could include all eligible members in England if no progress is made in negotiations. Meanwhile, GMB leaders will meet today to decide whether to call more strikes among their ambulance members. It comes as the government calls pay demands unaffordable. Meanwhile, in Scotland, teachers are beginning their 16 days of rolling strike action in an ongoing dispute over pay. Schools in Glasgow and East Lothian will only be open for pupils taking the preliminary exams. It comes after the Scottish Government offered a 5% pay offer on Thursday, but union members are demanding 10%. Meanwhile, MPs will debate new anti-strike legislation today that would require minimum service levels during industrial action. If passed, some health, fire, education, transport and border security staff could be forced to work during strikes or sacked if they don't. The TUC described the law as spiteful and said it would give ministers sweeping powers that restrict the right to strike. Labour says it will oppose the bill and any attempt to fast-track it through Parliament. People across Northern Ireland will begin receiving a £600 energy payments from today. This includes a £400 payment as part of the UK support scheme and £200 as part of the country's dependence on heating oil. Residents in the rest of the UK received their payments last year, with the delay in Northern Ireland being blamed on the political issues at Stormont. The black box and a cockpit voice recorder have been recovered from a plane which crashed in Nepal, killing at least 68 people. The local government has set up a panel to investigate the cause of the crash after the plane carrying 72 people from the capital, Kathmandu, went down. It's Nepal's worst plane crash in 30 years. Italy's most wanted Mafia boss has been arrested in Sicily after 30 years on the run. Matteo Messina Denaro, who was detained in Palermo, is alleged to be a boss of the Sicilian Mafia. He's been sentenced to a life term for his role in the 1992 murders of 2 anti-Mafia prosecutors, as well as facing life for his role in bomb attacks in Florence, Rome and Milan, which killed 10 people the following year. Marks & Spencer has announced plans to open 20 new shops across the UK. The store overhaul is said to create over 3,000 jobs. The company also plans to open 8 full-line stores in shopping centres across the UK and 12 new food halls, including in Barnsley and Stockport. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens, of course. Now, though, it's back to Bev.
Very good morning. This is GB News. Welcome back to Bev Turner today. Now, here's what's coming up on the show this morning. I've got Liam Halligan here in just a moment on 3 big economic stories. The launch of the World Economic Forum in Davos, but also good news about Marks & Spencer's and house prices. And is net zero a total scam? Experts say that the price of reaching net zero will cost households at least double the amount estimated in a government review. So why then are they pushing ahead with its ambitions? We'll weigh the pros and cons of the net zero strategy and what it means for the pound in your pocket. My panellists, ex-SAS trooper Phil Campion and author Amy Nickel will be back here to cover more of the day's news stories. And of course, this show is much improved by your views. Don't forget, we've got the Twitter poll going. This morning, I'm asking you, are you in support of teachers taking strike action? At the moment, 80% of you do not support the teachers striking. Keep your votes coming and tweet me at GB News to have your say. So the World Economic Forum kicks off in Davos today in Switzerland amid fears of a global recession. Business leaders from across the world will meet to discuss the war in Ukraine, economic instability, inflation, climate change, amongst others. Meanwhile, Oxfam are pushing for a windfall tax on food companies to fight inequality as inflation grows. Liam Halligan is with me now. Hello, Liam.
Hello.
Do you think we should be worried about Davos and what they're all doing? A lot of kind of suspicion and rumours and speculation spins around the World Economic Forum and the extent to which they influence government policy. Do you think that's founded?
Well, I don't get to Davos much these days. I've been there various occasions in the past. And I think what gets people's heckles up, if you like, is that it's a powwow of the great and the good of business and politics on an international scale. And yet there's very little transparency. These are often closed-door sessions and the guest list is very, very exclusive. We've got
How
people...
did you get in?
Because I'm an international public intellectual, Bev. You've got city behemoths like you've got Wall Street giants, you've got Goldman Sachs, you've got JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, you've got the big oil majors, Chevron, BP, they'll all be there, a lot of political leaders. There's about 2,500 to 3,000 actual delegates, but then there are NGOs like you say, Oxfam and many others sort of protesting on the fringe, all in this kind of very exclusive Swiss mountain village. Not so much snow there these days because there's not much snow in the Alps at the moment, as keen skiers will know. Interestingly, Joe Biden isn't turning up, even though Trump often went to Davos, and Rishi Sunak also isn't turning up. Our leaders know that in this cost of living squeeze, when you're turning up in sort of chocolate box Switzerland and hobnobbing, doing your sort of own job prospects no harm, then it isn't a good look. Another interesting one, it is cooperation in a fragmented world. That is the theme, not least because of Russia-Ukraine. There'll be lots to talk about energy bills and climate change and so on. But interestingly, representatives of Man United are at Davos because they're looking for a buyer.
No.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow, I did not know that.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the problem is, like you say, it's about this lack of transparency and we feel like there's a lack of democracy. If there are people in those rooms making huge decisions which will affect our lives, we want to know about it and we want to know whether we have actually got an emasculated government. Maybe that's the word. All the muscle is over there.
What I would say is there's a definite type. There's sort of Davos man, and now women these days, of course.
I'm guessing mainly men.
But it is mainly men. these are people who have an almost monochrome view of the world. They're all into, international institutions holding power as opposed to the nation state. You don't get many Brexiteers turning up at Davos, and I should know. You get people who are very, very mobile, live in many, many different countries. They may, a lot of people feel, be very distant from how ordinary people think and feel and their animus, and yet they are very, very influential. So you get a kind of self-reinforcing upward spiral of a sort of globalist outlook rather than a more down-to-earth outlook. And of course, Davos is the kind of place where billionaires go to be watched by millionaires, and you've got the millionaires there who are trying to ingratiate themselves, get jobs with the billionaires, journalists among them. Take it from me, it's happening right now as we're talking. So I completely understand, even though I've been on the guest list in the past, I'm not going to be on the guest list anymore, I'm sure, after what I've said, but I do understand why an awful lot of people feel it's remote and ever so slightly shady.
There's one journalist who has been tweeting about his experiences there, and he posted that everybody has to do a lateral flow or PCR test, I think, before you go into COVID. If you don't,
so that's the stricter one, isn't it?
This is stricter, and if you don't do the test, your accreditation is instantly deactivated, and you're not allowed in. And this idea that there is top-down control of the individual is what I think a lot of people have been very frightened of in the last couple of years. And we talk about the World Economic Forum's ambition for the planet. I would love Rishi Sunak to come out and tell us journalists never ask him a question. How influenced are you by what the World Economic Forum want you to do and what Britain should look like? Anyway, we could talk about this all day, Liam, but let's talk about things a little bit closer to home. House prices, is this good news or bad news?
Well, it depends on your point of view. If you're a homeowner, you want house prices to go up. If you're somebody trying desperately to get on the property ladder, you're worried your kids can't get on the property ladder, then you'll probably be quite happy if there's a pretty significant house price fall. The general mood is that there's going to be a house price fall to some degree this year. That's what all the sort of, start of year predictions said. I don't think it will be a particularly big fall, but interest rates are going up. Again, I don't think they've got that much further to go up. I personally think that the recession, as and when it comes, will be a lot shallower than many other people are saying. I think inflation will abate quicker now. I was very early to say inflation's coming, pilloried for it, but now I'm saying I think inflation is going to ebb away quite soon and the cost of living squeeze will ease. But Rightmove, even though house prices have fallen a bit in recent months, Rightmove, which is a property agency, said that on their survey, prices went up in January. That really surprised people compared to January 2022. The average house price across the UK, there aren't any regional breakdown of these figures. If there were, I'd be bringing them to you absolutely at the front of my comments. But for now, the average house price across the country is £362,438, an enormous, eye-watering amount of money, and that's up £3,301 on the same month in 2022. And yet, because house prices kind of surged as we came out of lockdown, even though house prices are up in January, they're still up compared to January 2022. They're still down on October 2022 by about £8,000. So this is a slight upward break in what is a downward trend over recent months.
But if that's just because of the lack of supply of houses in January, with people being nervous about the economy and thinking, I'm just going to sit tight.
That's right. That's exactly right. And also the fundamental lack of supply of housing in general, something I've written about a huge amount over the years. We do have too few homes in the UK, and we have population growth, we have natural population growth, we have immigration, of course, and where there are too few homes and more people want them, then they are going to... But what will happen, as interest rates rise, though, mortgage demand should fall a little bit, which keeps the lid on these house prices.
Now, you and I last week, Liam, we had a little chat about Marks and Spencer's, and I was telling you that I didn't think their clothes were very good, although you might think that's a bit rich coming from you wearing that today. Do you like this? It's a bit like Margot off The Good Life.
The Good Life.
Yeah.
Hey, Jenny.
It is, well done. Well, I'll chat about Marks and Spencer's.
Don't you see yourself more as a sort of Felicity Kendall, Barbara?
Probably am. I'm somewhere between the two.
Tom and Barbara Good. I'm feeling more like Tom Good in my sort of tweedy jacket.
Yeah, you look good. But we were talking about this last week because they'd had decent sales. They'd had a decent amount of revenue come in, but not necessarily sold more stuff.
Yeah.
Great news for Marks and Spencer today on Blue Monday. What's the great news, Liam?
Well, the great news is that Marks and Spencer have announced that they're going to open 20 new stores by the end of next year, and that is pretty good news.
That's amazing.
And they're saying by the end of 2025 they're going to have 180 full line stores, so clothes and everything across the UK, and 420 food stores. And some of these new full line stores are going to be, wait for it, in Leeds, Liverpool, Birmingham and Manchester. So,
Great.
of course, that's good news. Marks and Sparks, who, of course, are a high street institution, they've been around 139 years now. They say that these new store openings are going to add 3,400 new jobs. Often these retail jobs, they're useful little parts, some full-time jobs, but they're part-time jobs. A lot of working mums like these kind of part-time jobs. They add to the flexibility of the labour market. Though this is Blue Monday, Bev, and I am an economist and we're dismal scientists, aren't we? So what I have to say, just a bit of a reality check, M&S are canny people. They know on Blue Monday, a little bit of good news, a high street brand, we're all going to pick it up, right?
You're so cynical,
No, I'm not. I'm just
Liam
a very
Halligan.
experienced journalist, and I know these things. That's not cynical. That's just understanding public relations. And what I would say is, in their press release, it doesn't mention that in October they said that 67 stores are actually closing.
Is this something to do, though? I was sort of thinking, you're absolutely right. I hate the fact that you've seen that before me. You're so clever, Liam. This is a bit of a PR stunt, isn't it? A bit of good news on a bad day. But is it also possibly because they say they're going to rejuvenate their high street presence? Is this because we're going to have lots of empty properties? Are they swooping in, do you think?
I think when you have been around for 139 years, and let's say, let's be clear, M&S are an absolute retail thoroughbred.
Yeah.
The way the world retails, the likes of M&S, Tesco, they invented mass market retailing along with the Americans. They've got every right to be proud of their incredible reputation, and indeed they are a byword for reasonably good value quality, aren't they? Sort of mid value quality. They're one of Britain's great aspirational brands, and M&S have also got deep pockets. So I actually think, as well as a bit of media management, throwing the broadcast media a sugar-coated bone on on Blue Monday, knowing that we're all going to go for it. I also think that M&S, very, very shrewd people, a bit like me, see a sign of an upturn here. They see green shoots. They see the fact that maybe this cost of living squeeze will sooner rather than later come to an end. There are still going to be some difficult months, but I don't accept the Bank of England's view, actually, that we're going to be in recession pretty much the whole of this year. I don't accept that at all.
Good.
I think that's completely a wayward, rogue estimate, but lots of people pick up on it because, of course, it's the Bank of England.
You're not just saying that to be positive on Blue Monday, are you, Liam?
No, I'm not. I'm saying I wouldn't. To me, my reputation is too important. I genuinely believe there'll be an upturn sooner than the vast majority of economists think. And I think M&S are shrewdly positioning themselves as being among the first to put their money where their mouth is. Yes, they said they're closing 67 stores in October, but they're now saying they're opening 20 new stores and big stores.
Yeah.
Chapeau.
Great. Marvellous. Thank you. Thanks, Liam. Right, you've been getting in touch, remember? gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email. Let's have a look at a few of them. On the police new strike powers, Dee has said whenever pictures are shown of police in other countries coming down tough on protesters, we get experts and commentators all over the media praising them. However, as soon as we try to do it here, the public complains. And Peter said, did anyone in government think for 1 second to ask the police if they need new laws? I bet they don't. There is sufficient laws now to remove protesters when roads are blocked, but have failed to use those powers. New laws are not required. And on the teacher strikes, Stephen has said, I believe in the right to strike, but I wonder if inflation was lower before the war in Ukraine, would any sector be striking? Well, thank you very much for all of your views. Keep them coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Don't forget to vote in our Twitter poll as well. I'm asking you, do you support the teachers taking strike action? We're going to find out about 5 o'clock today whether English and Welsh teachers will also be striking. The Scottish ones already are. And What else have we got? Right, after the break, my panellists, Phil Campion and Amy Nickel. They're good together. We never had these two on together. It's quite feisty. They're going to join me for a look at some of the day's top news stories and how they would handle these teacher strikes. See you in a minute.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good morning, welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News. My panel are back here with me, Amy Nickel, writer and broadcaster, and ex-SAS trooper and security expert Phil Campion. Now, Phil, let's talk about teacher strikes. I mean, they've been through quite a lot, our kids, in the last couple of years. Do you think why is that not in the forefront of the mind of these teachers?
That is what should be in the forefront of the mind of these teachers. Look, they've had the COVID thing. It is difficult for children nowadays. It really is. At every angle, they've got something coming. Look, their grievances aside, these teachers, your job must come first. That's the profession that you chose. Soldiers don't strike. They're not allowed to strike for a start, but, you know, and they could argue we've only had 3.7 in the last 10 years. Do you know what I mean? They get on with what they're doing primarily.
Yeah.
That's their job. That's what they do. And I think teachers should take that line.
Yeah.
That if it's going to impact on the students too much, you can't do that. You can't do that. They've had a torrid time.
They really have, and there were so few teachers standing up during the pandemic and saying, you know what, this is a disease which predominantly affects the very elderly. Children are at a statistically zero risk from this. We need to get them back in the classrooms, but they didn't do that, Amy. I'm so disappointed by the fact that they now might strike.
I think that teachers would say that they have got pupils at the forefront when they're deciding to go on strike, because the conditions that teachers are in the classroom in schools at the moment has become untenable. So it's not productive.
In what way? What do you mean?
So retention of teachers has never been is in a terrible state. So 1 in 3 are leaving the profession. They're completely overworked. They're understaffed. They're not trained in some things that they should be, which comes to like mental health, social work, that kind of.
Oh, I think they're obsessed with it.
You could say isn't the job of a teacher, but
I think they're obsessed with mental health. That's all my kids' teachers seem to ever talk about. Sometimes, one of them particularly, they just talk about mental health all the time.
Well, I think their mental health is at risk if they continue to have to work in the conditions that they are at the moment. Because let's not forget that striking is always a last resort, and they've been pushed into this. So if you do have any anger, I would level it at the government and pay teachers a fair wage. Teachers deserve
190 days
so
a year?
much respect. So in Finland, they have one of the best teaching professions. To become a teacher, you have to have a master's degree, and that includes social, ethical and moral skills within that. It's a really highly paid profession, and that's why their education system is probably the best in the world, because we're talking about educating our children. The way we educate our children and the success that we have with that sets up the next generation, the future. It's crucial. And at the moment in the UK, we don't give the teaching profession the respect that it deserves.
That I agree with. But you know what? Let me tell you. But do you know what? Do you know who do respect teachers? Or we should, is parents. Like, we need them. We desperately need them. We're dependent on them to help our children know how to behave, how to think, how to go about the world.
I think there does need to be.
I despair at
There does need to be a look at parenting. That's a complete separate issue. But going back to the strike on teachers, right? 380 sessions you've got to deliver in a year, right? And that's not all one teacher. They don't do 380. They do their proportion of that 380. 190 days in a year and teacher training days. Well, if you want to strike, take a teacher training day. You can have that day to strike. How about that?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Because that doesn't impact the kids. All right, you can get your point across without impacting the kids who've already sat at home and lost nearly 2 years of an education, when are they going to catch that up?
Yeah.
Because we've got more kids coming through the pipeline. And I get your point about other countries doing it right and all the rest of it. That's their system. They're not probably catering for as many kids. Their recruitment processes. How long does it take to train a teacher up to get all those master's degrees and all that? We've got to get them through the door, get them out there and get them teaching.
But it's
or we've got to get them back from other professions.
It's the status of teachers, isn't it? In our society, the teaching profession doesn't come with... It's not completely respected in the way that it's one of the best jobs you can do, when really it should be. It's one of the most important jobs in our society. So why isn't it treated as such?
I don't know. I don't think we have the solution to this one. We want teachers to be... we know how important they are. Nobody would disagree with that. But I don't think that right now, the timing of this strike, when the kids have been through so much, I just think it absolutely stinks.
No, I totally agree with you.
And in fact, on this story, very similar, page 2 of the Daily Mail, one child goes to hospital every 20 minutes after self-harming with drugs or alcohol. This is what we're talking about.
This runs on to a product of what is happening around the child, right? Now, just to put it in perspective now, I do a lot with the Army Cadets. I'm the champion of the organisation, so I see a lot of youth in my time, in a year. Right? I watch what they're doing and I progress, and I learn about how they work and all that sort of stuff, OK? So, listen, bullying in the bedroom, that happens now.
On the phones?
Yeah, bullying in the bedroom on the phone, that happens now. That's an awful thing to happen. I mean, in my day, you had the gap in between leaving the gate and getting home. If you got your head kicked in that space, well, your dad would probably come up and do something about it for you.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen anymore. These kids are going home, they're getting picked on at school. They're getting it again in the bedroom at home on social media, and people getting hold of them behind online where adults aren't monitoring
How do you do that? Whose responsibility is it?
Parents need to monitor. Parents need to monitor that sort of stuff at home.
So much easier
How do you monitor
said than done.
So hard.
Do you know one of my solutions? And this is. I see lots of children. The ones that tend to do better, or the ones that are the ones that have outside activities from
100%.
school. And I'll tell you for why. Because if you're not getting on in school, if you went to, say, for instance, ballet, Army Cadets,
swimming club,
whatever,
netball.
swimming club, whatever, you then put yourself in front of a different audience. So you can then balance, your life out. So you might not be enjoying that, but you might be able to sort of air your grievances at this one and put something right about this one. Kids that go to outside activities get all sorts of skills that, quite frankly, are missing in school.
I couldn't agree
Discipline,
more.
teamwork, all that stuff. They haven't got time to do that in school.
But the problem is that the solution, Amy? It's just keep kids busy. A lot of kids these days, they're sat in their rooms, they're on their phones. The trouble is nothing is more interesting to them than their tech.
I think they can be as busy as we'd like them to be, but they're still going to have phones. And it's interesting that this story has come up when the online safety bill is back in Parliament this week, because I've been reading the testimony of Ian Russell, who was Molly Russell's dad, who, you know, she took her own life after seeing all this absolutely horrendous stuff online. And it brought up some statistics that I found quite shocking, that 3/4 of teens have watched self-harm content online, and 83% of those didn't even look for it.
Yeah.
I thought that was terrifying.
Well, that's the work that MP Miriam Cates is working really hard to have some accountability from the big tech giants over those sorts of incidents. But that just feels like a long way away, Phil, doesn't it? And if you've got a kid who's in distress, if you've got a 15-year-old who is self-harming, it's all very well an MP standing up in court, in the House of Commons, and talking about the fact that, you know, the guy that runs Google needs to take some responsibility for it. It's not going to...
It's in the here and now.
It's here and now.
It's the here and now that, you know, people need to identify the signs early. You know, perhaps teachers do need a little bit of training to sort of like spot these things within kids so they can nip it in the bud early enough.
Here's a controversial question then. Should these activities be compulsory? Because this is the problem with schools now, Phil. I've got 3 kids. Everything is optional. Everything is blooming optional. Everything. You don't have to do netball. You don't have to do athletics. You don't have to do football.
I'd love to see it compulsory. But the sort of like logistics behind making it, we can't get enough teachers. Look, the Army cadets are one. We struggle to get adults through the door to become adult force volunteers because it takes so much of their time. Yeah. Time is precious to everybody, and this is what's happening. There's probably just too many people for that to happen, isn't there? Do you know what I mean?
But you know what else it is?
There's under strain at the moment.
But there's also this strange sort of merry dance between parents and teachers, where teachers are saying, oh, we can't make kids do things they don't want to do for their mental health. And you've got parents often going, it's all right, I don't mind, just make them run around a field for half an hour and wear them out when they come home. You know, but then you've also got the other parents saying, don't make my child do anything they don't want to do, I don't want to upset them. We're in a mess, Amy, and the kids are the ones who are suffering.
Yeah, definitely. But also the kids now, they're growing up in a world that I know I don't understand. The whole idea that a teenage girl is filtering the way she looks to appear different online, and she's seeing filtered versions of herself. That must be absolutely decimating body image.
Oh, absolutely. And boys. And boys as well. The pressure to look good is just as much as the boys.
The pressures of social media and those sort of stuff that weren't there when we were kids is massive, and we underestimate that at the moment.
And
I think
that's why it's so hard
it's
to legislate.
And so therefore the legislation to control these people from what they're doing, i.e. the big giants, the Googles, the Twitters, the Instagram, they need gripping sooner rather than later.
We've got to move on, but there is one campaign at the moment that I think is going to gain some momentum this year, which is to make smartphones illegal for the under-16s, and I think there might be some argument to be said that might be a good idea. Now, after the break, I don't like banning anything, but right after the break, we're asking, are net zero pledges achievable? Senior lecturer in natural sciences at Bangor, commentator Dr. Christian Dunn, and our fantastic Common Sense correspondent June Slater will be debating that issue after your morning's news.
Bev, thank you. It's 11:33. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. A Metropolitan Police officer has pleaded guilty to multiple offences, including 24 counts of rape over 17 years. David Carrick, a serving officer, carried out 49 offences against 12 women. He admitted raping 9 of the women, some on numerous occasions over months or years. He's due to be sentenced early next month. A 22-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder following a drive-by shooting at a church in central London on Saturday. A 7-year-old girl has been left in a life-threatening condition after shots were fired from a car at St Aloysius Church in Euston. 4 other women and another child were also injured in the attack. Thousands of teachers in England and Wales could go on strike over pay as the results of a ballot will be announced later today. Elsewhere, nurses are walking out on Wednesday and Thursday this week. Members of the Royal College of Nursing have warned the next walkout could include all eligible members in England if no progress is made in negotiations. Meanwhile, MPs will debate new anti-strike legislation today that would require minimum service levels during industrial action. If passed, some health, fire, education, transport and border security staff could be forced to work during strikes or sacked if they don't. The TUC described the law as spiteful and said it would give ministers sweeping powers that restrict the right to strike. Labour says it will oppose the bill and any attempt to fast-track it through Parliament. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
As a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Very good morning. It's 11:37. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. Now, as the government reviews its net zero pledges, a Conservative MP has warned that delaying climate action could risk damaging the UK's economic prospects. The report by Chris Skidmore says that the government's climate policies need to be more consistent and ambitious. He's launched Mission Zero, the Net Zero Review, this morning in the last few minutes. However, climate scientists are predicting that households could be made to pay at least double Number 10's estimates to bring emissions under control. So let's work out where we're at with this. It's one of the biggest news stories every week. Net zero, should we be having a vote on it? OK, analysis from senior lecturer in natural sciences at Bangor University, Dr Christian Dunn, and the commentator June Slater. Good morning to you both. Let me start with you, Dr Dunn, if I may. Why do we need net zero? How urgent is this emergency, and is it worth it to the country in terms of our economic position?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the answer would be yes, we do need to do it, because all the evidence suggests that if we don't do it, the cost of not doing it far outstrip the effort and the money that we'd have to spend to get it done now. So we have to do it. And the consequences of not doing it, if some of the models which show some of the worst case scenarios do happen, then you're talking about complete collapse of society. I mean, you're talking about staple crops not being able to grow in certain parts of the world, which we rely upon. So the consequences of not doing it could be catastrophic. So we've got to do it. And of course, I understand the disgruntlement for many people seeing these costs rise. And I mean, that has to be addressed by the government. And I think it has been in this report, because Skidmore does sort of show that actually taking some of these actions will save the country money in the long term. In the short term, there will be pain.
What sort of timescale do you see, Christian?
For having this action done, or for climate change?
No, what sort of timescale for humanity, for the planet? What sort of timescale are we working on? We talk about this emergency. Is that our lifetime?
I think we are starting to see the effects of it, yes, now, right now, because the latest, or the science that is coming out, is showing that these extreme weather events, such as the heat wave across Europe, the heat wave across India, and some of the wildfires, these extreme weather conditions are happening in more frequency and more severity because of climate change. So yes, we are seeing these results. But what I would always stress when it comes to these issues is the models are fantastic and they're getting better all the time. But what these models cannot predict are tipping points. And when we get to these tipping points, such as permafrost melt, such as ocean currents changing, we don't know what's going to happen then. So we need to be making sure that we take action as soon as we possibly can. We have to do this.
Common Sense correspondent June Slater, would you like to respond what you've just heard then about the emergency that we're all facing?
Yeah, I would, because I think what we need to do in this country and Western societies is recognise a list of priorities and what is and is not an emergency. Planning for events that may or may not happen 300 to 1,000 years from now isn't an emergency, it's a strategy. Emergencies are things like people not being able to afford their heating, not being able to afford diesel for their cars, not being able to get an ambulance. Those are emergencies. They're happening here and now, and MPs should be concentrating on that. Let's just do a bit of background on Mr. Chris Skidmore. He's the guy that said that Theresa May's Brexit deal was an excellent idea. I beg to differ. He also said that the 39 billion bung that we gave to the EU was small potatoes considering what we were getting back for it. I'm not quite sure we've seen anything yet. And the best thing I can advise to scientists is to step away from the science and look back at your society, because you're making sweeping statements like all the evidence points to. No, it doesn't, because I'm looking at evidence that points away from it. For instance, Chris Skidmore, he's just blocked me on Facebook because I put something on his thread because he said he was pleased to announce the launch of his net mission zero. I think it's mission Skid Row, because we can't afford to do this and we can't afford to get there by 2030. And those are the facts the scientists need to work on to come up with a formula that allows us to live our lives in a reasonable fashion. We all want to see less plastic in the sea. We all want to see animals treated better. We're not in disagreement with that. What I'm in disagreement with is specialists coming out with specialist knowledge. Chris is sat there probably with a full belly and his heating on. There's a lot of people in this country queuing up at food banks. There's people can't afford to switch the heating on. That's your emergency, not what you're talking about. Now, the other thing that's a worry for me with politicians, not particularly the scientists, because they're following something they absolutely believe in. I do not believe that what you're saying is an absolute fact. I think there's a lot of country science, and David Bellamy spoke about it many, many times, but he got cancelled, of course, because he wasn't delivering the drivel that most of the government comes out with. Now,
thank you, June. Just let me bring our doctor back in. A lot to take on there, Dr. Christian Dunn. Do you take June's point, though, that the science isn't settled, and in the meantime, while we can't pay to put our heating on and we can't fill our car with petrol, there should be a debate about whether the emergency is as critical as some scientists say that it is.
Okay, so to take the latter point first, if I may. So, can we afford, should we, the cost side of things? If we actually got our kind of our room in order, or our house in order, sorry, when it came to things like insulating our homes, providing power with sustainable resource sources, the price of energy would be coming down. And I think that's what people kind of forget about. It's, yes, the transition from fossil to sustainable is quite extreme. But if we did it on a steady way, and if we'd started this before, for example, why on earth why doesn't every new development have to produce a certain amount of its power by microgeneration on site? So, for example, they would all have to have solar panels, wind turbines, small wind turbines. Why isn't that the case? Why aren't all our homes insulated properly? And then when it comes to the case of the science, I understand people say, well, that it is not finalised, and there is other suggestions and arguments out there. But the overwhelming evidence of science says that it is happening. And I think that's the issue that people kind of forget about. The example I would always give is when it comes to medicine. So, for example, most of us all trust, obviously, modern medicine. And so when we're ill, we go to the doctors and we use whatever they suggest. We don't take the advice of Jeff from Minnesota, because he once said that eating tomatoes makes you completely healthy. We take on that modern science, that modern medicine, and we trust it to get ourselves better. Yet people don't want to seem to do this when it comes to something as serious as the environment. The science, the bulk of science, overwhelmingly says that this is the case.
June, we've got to wrap it up, but last 10 seconds, June, to you.
It's not overwhelming evidence. It's overwhelmingly publicised. That's the difference. What we know doesn't get talked about. And Chris Skidmore has actually done his own report on how well it's going. The man who delivered the agenda. Last thing I'll leave you with, was a public mandate for this. This kind of serious legislation should be put out to the public. Not scientists, not politicians, and certainly not extra non-government organisations. This is just a licence to create tax and create billionaire agendas that will benefit from the fact we will get fleeced.
Okay,
if he wants to talk about housing, I'm a property developer. I'll talk to him about why his plans can't happen.
Thank you, guys. Thank you both so much. June Slater and Dr. Christian Dunn there. Let me know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Some excerpts from Chris Skidmore's article. He says, moving quickly must include spending money. We know that investing in net zero today will be cheaper than delaying, as well as increasing the economic and climate benefits. The review recognises we have fallen behind, but it sets out how we can be world leading in these areas once again. We need to remove the barriers that are in place at the moment. That is Chris Skidmore, who is the chair of the Net Zero Review. Now, parents in Northern Ireland are sharing their concerns over how online gaming poses safety risks to their children. Over the past decade, video games have introduced more social elements, making them as dangerous as social media, some say, for vulnerable kids. Well, Dougie Beattie has the story.
They have everything. So whenever I was going, Daniel, what do you want for Christmas? And he's like, there was nothing that he didn't have. And a PlayStation was. Genuinely, the only thing that I could think of was that wee boy didn't have, and Stephen went, let's just let him get it.
Christina McConnell is a parent like so many others across the UK, questioning the gifts they bought for their children at Christmas. Online gaming is now changed. Colin Stitt of Unique Safeguards explains.
But essentially, gaming now looks like connecting with other people, whether friends in our school, down the street, bringing people together and actually playing against people right across the world. So actually, online gaming has become the new social frontier, connecting with others and playing against others.
Louise Marks is a parent that is aware of this and worries for her children's social skills.
Our children don't do relationships the way that we done relationships, because they do relationships through virtual. Like ours, they play online, they do virtual, but you're not seeing that person's facial expression.
Just how long do our children spend online, and do they interact with all other gaming participants?
On the weekends, maybe 10 hours a day. I don't really talk to them, so I'd talk to my friends if they're in a game, but I wouldn't really talk to people who I don't know, so I just turn my microphone off and just play.
With all social and gaming platforms, they are open to security breaches, and parents should be aware of the risks.
As a parent, it's really easy to become overwhelmed, isn't it, about actually what these games are, the risks that are involved with it. And fundamentally, it's really important as parents that we look at participating in what our children and young people do online. So when we give them access to consoles, when we give them access to tablets and devices to play these games on and to be able to connect over the internet, it's really important that we don't abdicate that responsibility, that we participate, that we engage in open conversation with our children and young people about the risks, but also that we utilise the benefits of safety settings on these platforms, that we look at the parental controls and that we discuss these risks with our children and young people, and also find content that's suitable. Gaming content that's suitable for our children and young people to play is really crucially important.
Children should always be aware not to engage with those hiding behind the game.
anonymity in these games also can create, in the same way it can on social media, that actually users can be anonymous on these platforms and look to build relationships and build rapport with children, young people, and that can be exploited and again misused, and again that's where those who maybe have a sexual deviant interest in children, young people, can then use to exploit them for other purposes.
Dougie Beattie, GB News, Belfast.
Thank you, Dougie. Now, I'm joined back with my guests for one last time this morning. Amy Nicol, writer and broadcaster, one of the few left-leaning commentators who is brave enough to come on GB News, so please don't give her too much of a hard time, and ex-SAS trooper and security expert Phil Campion. Nice to see you dressed up smart for the day, Phil.
I did dress you in best clubber.
People were giving you a hard time on Twitter going, nice to see you've got your suit.
There you go.
I like a bit of proper manness in the studio.
Actually, why not?
Absolutely. Right, now, NHS. 2 in 3 voters think that the NHS is offering a bad service, which kind of means that 1 in 3 think it's all right. Let's have a look at some of these.
That's a shocking bit, isn't it?
Which, the fact that 1 in 3 think it's good.
3 would think it was bad. Who are these other people?
Well, I would put my mum in that category.
Really?
Yes, I don't think... Hello, Mum. I don't think she's just the only person in the country. But, for instance, she has an ongoing kind of semi-chronic condition, an autoimmune condition, and she gets the most incredible service from the NHS, from King's Hospital in London and from the local hospital where she lives in Oxfordshire. And she has a condition called aplastic anemia. She won't mind me telling you. And she gets amazing treatment. And she's always comes back from the hospital and she says, what the NHS, when they do it right, they do it really, really right.
You get 2 types of experience here, don't you?
Yeah.
Right? You get your mum's experience, right? And God bless her, hopefully she does well out of it, OK? But she's having a great experience.
I mean, she's still a pain in my neck a lot of the time, Phil.
Presumably some sort of programme that she has to go through and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, regular
It's pre-planned,
tests.
it's in the bag, she's having that done. Great, lovely. And they do a tremendous job in doing that. I think the other 2/3 only get exposure to this when they've stubbed their toe.
Yes.
All right.
And
they end up in an A&E room and they're going, wow, I haven't even seen the triage nurse in 2 hours. And there's a clipboard and cup of tea mentality. Well, people walk around like that, don't they? Do you know what I mean? Going, hey, I'll be in a minute, mate. Do you know what I mean? And that's what riles people up. That's what gets people going. That's what gets their backs up.
Yeah, because there's no question about the service that can be provided and the abilities of the doctors and nurses. That is amazing. But it's getting access to that and there being enough of that. I think that's where the NHS is falling down at the moment.
You know, over the years, they've had massive pots of money thrown at them and all that sort of stuff.
£4 billion quid a week.
All that sort of stuff, right? Where is that going? Why is somebody not stepping back and going, hang on a minute, it isn't working, right? Send somebody in, maybe an outside authority to say, right, I'll walk around with a clipboard, I'll see what's going on, and I'll see where I can pinch a quid, nick a quid, get some time going, maybe you're not doing that. Do you know what I mean? It's just the whole thing needs.
Draw issue at the pots of money argument, which I hear all the time, because actually over the last 10 years, there's been gradual cuts to all departments. And if we really want to fund the NHS properly, then surely the funding needs to be comparable to a healthcare system in a comparable sized country. And it's not. So although it is indisputably seems a large amount of money, it's not enough.
I don't know. What
would
the statistic I would like to see is how much of that money is wasted.
Oh,
how much goes on complete nonsense. And when you look back at it, you go, oh, do you know what I mean?
So much.
And what would you call complete nonsense?
Any wasted money, anything that wastes money or time, resources or time. If they're wasted, they have to be looked at. It has to be debriefed and it has to be back-fed so that it's not wasted again. And repeatedly, they seem to make the same mistake.
Because people always draw issue at the management. Well, there's only 2% of the NHS that are in management positions, which is, again, not comparable to other industries. You need that. You need that level of management.
Often people talk about, we have these diversity managers, as in that's a waste of money, and that's a different conversation to have, really. And I think that's I think that is actually a bit of a diversion from where we genuinely have waste, which is pharmaceutical companies seeing an invoice come in, seeing a request for products come in from the NHS and sticking a massive zero on the end of it because they know it will pay
absolutely.
it. That's the waste that bothers
They should be reined in. They need to be reined in, definitely. When that sort of thing happens and it's identified, you go, hang on a minute, where'd you get that price from? Justify that price.
The procuring of contracts, the procuring of drugs, the procuring of services, I think we get absolutely stitched up as the NHS.
Yeah, but the NHS was never going to be safe in the hands of this government, because even at its creation after the Second World War, the Tories voted against it. They didn't want a National Health Service. So I just don't think he's in safe hands.
I just want us to do this other story right. Britain shows a lack of interest with last place in Savings League. The British public are the worst in the developed world at saving our money. 750,000 of the poorest households have no money put away, and the richest benefiting the most from £7 billion in annual government tax breaks, a report has revealed. Are you a saver or a spender, Phil Campion?
I'm a spender, but with this in particular, I look at those 750,000 families. What are they supposed to save? Yeah. Everything's gone up. The cost of living, it's heat or eat for most of these people. So what are they supposed to put away? Do you know what I mean? And when you do manage to get slightly ahead, it's like, oh, my washing machine's gone.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Bang, I'm straight back in the hole.
There's often no wiggle room, is there? But you see, I often...
And then you've got all these people offering you loans every 5 minutes. Go on, I'll give you a loan. I'll give you the washing machine on the never, never. And then you're in a bigger hole and you're looking up at it, and the richer people are going ding, 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 and the poorer people are going ding, 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 ding.
But do you know what I like? I like talking to the elderly about this topic, because what they say to me is, young people, you all spend too much, you don't live within your means, you've got to cut your cloth accordingly.
No, I don't like those people that say that, because at the moment, the average house price is 8 times the average income. When those people were saving up for houses, I think it was 2 times your national income, your average income. So we know a lot more about saving than them, because they never had to do much. And the reason that we are more likely to have this Netflix account and avocado on toast is because our spending habits have completely changed. Because now saving for a deposit is so unobtainable, there's no point even trying.
Oh, well, you've given up, Amy Nicole. Then you need to try harder. Right, guys, thank you so much. We've been asking you this morning whether you support the teachers' strikes. Well, according to our official Twitter poll, over 3,000 of you voted. Thank you. 21% of you support the teachers, but 79% of you say, no, you do not support it. Right, Phil Campion, Amy Nicole, thank you so much. Coming up next on GB News is GB News Live with Darren McCaffrey. I'm Bev Turner. I'll see you tomorrow morning.
Hello, I'm Aidan McKibben, and here's the latest forecast from the Met Office. It's turned colder, and it's only going to feel that way today. There will be some showers, and those showers in places will be falling as snow, but also some sunshine as this low pulls away. We pull in this clean but cold northerly wind. This low brought some rain and some hill snow to the southeast earlier on, but it is moving away. Wintry showers into eastern England. Mainly these are rain and hail at lower levels, but some sleetiness mixed in. Rain showers for the far southwest, but the brunt of the showers are affecting northern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest Wales, and elsewhere there'll be some sunshine, but wherever you are, it is going to feel cold. 6 or 7 in the south, 1 or 2 in the north, and that means these showers are going to be coming in as snow, a few centimetres possible at lower levels, more significant snow over the hills of Northern Ireland and northern Scotland, as much as 15 centimetres building up again over the higher parts of northern Scotland, and some very significant snow for Shetland indeed. But wherever you are, it's going to be a cold night, and with temperatures dropping away, risk of ice in places, especially West Wales, southwest England with some rain showers here, northwest England, as well as Northern Ireland and northern Scotland. So some slippery surfaces about first thing on Tuesday, but also a bright start. So although it will be very cold and frosty for all of us, it's going to be a sunny one for many. And those showers will continue into the north and the west with some, again, wintry showers affecting West Wales, northwest England. Those continue into Tuesday night. Northern Ireland and northern Scotland seeing further snow accumulations. And later Tuesday, the risk of gales for northern Scotland and some very significant blizzards, especially over hills and into coasts. So some wintry weather around over the next few days before it turns drier and eventually milder later this week.
I'm Camilla Tominey. Join me on GB News on Sunday mornings for a politics show with personality on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Very good afternoon and welcome to GB News Live. I'm Darren McCaffrey and here's what's coming up on today's programme. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is backing the police to clamp down on highly disruptive and dangerous protests under new plans to be announced in Parliament later. Through an amendment tabled to the Public Order Bill, the government will broaden the legal definition of serious disruption, giving police greater flexibility and clarity over when they can intervene to disrupt the small number of tactics used by protesters to block roads and slow marching, as we can see. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has said that tanks from Britain that it plans to send to Ukraine will burn. Over the weekend, the UK said it would send 14 of its Challenger 2 main battle tanks, as well as other advanced artillery support in the coming weeks. We'll have the latest on that. And we're set for a big political showdown. Rishi Sunak is set to block Nicola Sturgeon's proposed new gender recognition laws in Scotland. The Prime Minister reportedly intends to torpedo the legislation passed by Holyrood in a move which will spark a furious constitutional row with the SNP. Are we heading towards a constitutional conflict? What are the latest throughout today's programme? And as always, we want to hear from you on GB News. You know the email address, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Let me know what you think of all today's big stories over the next couple of hours. But first, at the top of the hour, is the very latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 1 minute past 12. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. A Metropolitan Police officer has pleaded guilty to multiple offences, including 24 counts of rape over a 17-year period. David Carrick, a serving officer, carried out 49 offences against 12 women. He admitted raping 9 of the women, some on numerous occasions, over months or years. He's due to be sentenced early next month. Barbara Gray, Assistant Commissioner of the Met Police, commended the bravery of his victims.
I want to commend the outstanding bravery of the 13 women who came forward and reported the horrific crimes they were victims of. On behalf of the Metropolitan Police Service, I am truly sorry that they have suffered at the hands of this police officer. Carrick is a prolific serial sex offender who preyed on women over a period of many years.
Police in England and Wales could be given powers to intervene in protests before they become too disruptive. Parliament will today debate the amendment to the Public Order Bill, which would allow police to shut down demonstrations before they cause disruption. If passed, it would make it easier for officers to stop demonstrators blocking roads. Human rights group Liberty says the plans are an attack on the right to protest. But Policing Minister Chris Philp says when it impacts people's lives, the police should have a right to intervene.
Of course we
as a government, fully respect the right to protest, but that does need to be properly balanced with the right of the general public to go about their day-to-day lives. And where some of these protesters have been deliberately trying to ruin the lives of their fellow citizens, we think that is not acceptable. But it's possible to protest while at the same time allowing ordinary citizens to go about their daily lives.
Former aide to the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Leon Emirali, told GB News there needs to be a balance here.
There is a fine line here between being what's sensible policing and also being perhaps too heavy-handed. And I think no one wants to live in a police state. And that maybe is some of the fears that people will be having when reading this policy. We want to live in a country where the police are fair and firm, but not sort of restricting people's right to protest.
A 22-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder following a drive-by shooting at a church in central London on Saturday. A 7-year-old girl has been left in a life-threatening condition after shots were fired from a car at St Aloysius Church in Euston. 4 other women and a 12-year-old girl were also injured in the attack. Thousands of teachers in England and Wales could go on strike over pay as the results of a ballot will be announced later today. Elsewhere, nurses are walking out on Wednesday and Thursday this week. Members of the Royal College of Nursing have warned the next walkout could include all eligible members in England for the first time. Meanwhile, GMB leaders will meet today to decide whether to call more strikes among their ambulance members.